Insert an SD card.
Shalom. I want to start by giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Makakudash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Salutation to the oath of the elect that is pushing His truth in the four corners, the highways and byways. Once again, all praises, glory, and honor is due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Makakudash. Right? This is brother Zachariah here with another lesson. And this lesson gonna be titled, it's time to get rid of all the vices. Alright? Because Yahweh Shai is on his way back. Alright? And hey, he's coming for men of a certain character. Alright? He's coming back for men of high character. Alright? And hey, you're not gonna make it, alright, if you're dealing with certain vices, and that's just the truth of the matter, right? So let me first get the definition of the word vice, right? Right, vice. It says moral fault, wickedness, in reference to a specific individual sin. From Old French, fault, failing, defect, irregularity, misdemeanor. Right? It also says offense, blemish, imperfection. Right? Hey, and what does Scripture say? Scripture say we should be perfect, alright, and without blemish, right? Now a vice could be it could be a lot of things, alright. May not be necessarily something that is unlawful, but it may be something that is not beneficial to you, alright, or it's not something edifying. Alright? It doesn't serve you any good, or it doesn't serve the ministry any good. Alright? Hey, and like I said, this could be a lot of things. This could be women. Alright? This could be a love of money. Alright? Or the want of money. Alright? This could be the desire for status in this world, drinking too much, right? It could be a lot of things, spending too much time with certain hobbies, all these things are things that could, throw you off. All right. Now let me get you into some precept. Right? This is Sirach chapter 19 and verse 1. It says, a laboring man that is given to drunkenness shall not be rich. Alright? So we are laboring in this truth to be rich, alright, in the kingdom. But it says what? If you give yourself to drunkenness, right? If you give yourself your hard desires, right? Or it could be those desires could be a lot of things. All right. You may not see the riches that we laboring for. Right? It says, and he that contemneth small things shall fall little and little. Alright? So as a brother, you got certain vices. Alright? If you
Please
if you contaminate, all right, if you make light of certain things, you're gonna fall little on little, and guess what, when you fall in little by little, little things just end up becoming big things. All right, so is going to get to a point that is going to reach a boiling point. All right, so if you as a brother, and you know that you have certain vices, you should be working to get rid of those things. All right, again, let me read the definition for vices. It says fault, failing, defect, irregularity, misdemeanor, defect, offense, blemish, imperfection. All right, so hey, you should have a good report, by the church, all right. Hey, and not saying that you ain't gonna make mistakes. Like brothers, gave testimonies of when they didn't know the limits, the drinking limits, and got drunk, and these kind of things. Elders who were suspended, all right, for whatever mistake they made, but now they in good standing. All right, basically what I'm saying is that it's a process. All right, and you gotta stay locked in on the process, all right, of cleansing yourself, where it says in Psalms 119, it says, wherewith shall a young man cleanse his way? By taking heed to your words thereof. All right, with this book. And when you dissect this book properly, all right, there's a precept for every situation, how you should conduct yourself in every situation. All right, and that's why the scripture says, study to make thyself approved. All right, because if you use a brother who's studying and make thyself approved, and you're applying what you study, then you wouldn't drink too much. All right, you will look after your diet. All right, you won't chase after money, you won't chase after women. All right, you wouldn't give too much time to things that is not of the body. All right, or things that would affect you in your walk. Hey, and like I said, some of these things might be lawful, all right, but it's just not expedient. All right, let me get this. Ecclesiastes chapter 10 verse 1, it says, dead flies caused the ointment
Please insert an
of the
SD card.
apothecary to send forth a stinking savor, so that a little folly in him that is in reputation for wisdom and honor. Alright? Hey, so a little folly could, actually blemish you. Alright? And the truth of the matter is, alright, we all battle with folly. That's the truth of the matter. Alright? But you don't want the folly, winning the fight. Alright? You want to conquer all your folly. Alright? Conquer all your demons then. Because if one of them overcome you, then the one can invite a second one. And the scripture says that a lot. All right, if you offend one of the law, then you offend all. All right, a little leaven the whole lump. Even the precept that we just read. So, hey, as a brother, you're supposed to constantly be trying to get rid of your folly. Especially now. All right, because things is getting real serious. All right, and Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, we seen it, is not playing to cast men out of the congregation. All right, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai isn't, it's not like before, basically, is what I'm trying to say. All right, whereby you will see men doing shit for a very long time. All right, as soon as men say or do certain things, the Most High out in them. Like I was telling the brothers them the other day that this fellow Deacon Akar, right, so called, he said he made a video saying that he no longer calling the name Yahweh Shai, and it wasn't even like 2 weeks after the Most High, the Most High cast it down in the midst of the congregation. All right. So hey, you gotta look out for these vices. All right. This is 2nd Maccabees. This is chapter 2 and verse 5 and 27. God, this is 2nd Maccabees chapter 5 and verse 27. It says, but Judas Maccabeus, or Judas Maccabee, with 9 others or thereabout, withdrew himself into the wilderness and lived in the mountains after the manner of beasts, with his company, who fed on herbs continually, lest they should be partakers of the pollutions. All right, and that is it. All right, this is a prime example. All right, it's better for you to live in the bushes, All right,
Please insert an SD card.
in the manner of beast than to be, than to be polluted. All right, because you hold on to certain things. All right, that is not of the spirit. You're gonna pollute yourself. All right, and you're gonna eventually destroy yourself. All right. So it's better if you don't have anything and not be polluted, all right, than to have something and it pollute you, or trying to be somebody in this world and it pollute you, all right, because vices is normally come from desire, all right. You lusting after something. That's where most bad habits, that's where most sins is come from. All right. But here is, Judas Maccabee, setting an example that, hey, it's better to have nothing and not be polluted. All right. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 12. It says, all things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient. All right. So again, a vice might be something it might be something that is lawful but not expedient. All right. Like to work is completely lawful, all right, but to overwork may not be expedient to you. All right. Or maybe that's a bad example. Let's use women. All right. For you to have a wife, to have two wives, to have three wives, is perfectly lawful. All right. But can you take care of three women? All right. If you have two women in your life, all right, do you have time for the truth? If you have one woman, if you're dealing with one woman, all right, do you have time for the truth? All right. Because the specific woman that you may be dealing with is affecting you from carrying out certain duties, All right. So think about it. Hey, it's lawful for you to have a glass of wine. All right. But if you have a glass of wine Monday night and Tuesday night, all right, you notice that on the third day you're gonna be tired. On Wednesday you're gonna be tired. And it's going to affect certain things. All right. Should you still go and take a glass of wine every night because it's lawful? Maybe there are some brothers out there that could drink a glass of wine every night. But that shit ain't for every brother.
Please insert
You know?
an SD card.
It's not for every brother. Alright? Yeah, but basically what I'm trying to say is, it's time to get rid of all the vices. Alright? It's time to get rid of all the vices. Alright? Because Yahweh Shai is coming back for men of high character, you know? Right? Second part, it says, all things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. Alright? And that is it right there. Alright? Not because you could do something mean that you should. Alright? Not because something is lawful or it might seem, slightly unharmful, alright, or slightly harmful, Salakio, it might seem benign, right? Mean you should do it, or that you should say it, alright, or pursue it, alright. It's perfectly lawful, it's lawful for you to pursue a damsel, alright, but look at the times, alright, look at the times, it says what? But I will not be brought under the power of any. Yeah. Not because it's lawful, mean you should do it. Alright, because you have a desire for it. Because that could lead to your destruction. Right? This is basically same thing. 1 Corinthians 10:23, it says, all things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. Actually, let's look up the word expedient. Ooh. Damn. Yeah, expedient, it says advantageous, fit, or proper to a purpose. Damn. Alright. So hey, if something isn't advantageous, it doesn't bring an advantage to you, alright, and that's why when you about to do or say things, you should ask yourself, what is the purpose of this? Alright, right? It says advantageous, fit, proper to a purpose. Damn, it says proper to a purpose. So it might have this thing may have a purpose, but it might not be proper to the purpose. Take for example these women. They're not proper for their purpose. They have a purpose, all right, and we still have to deal with them in this time, all right, but they're not proper to their purpose, all right, because how they are now is not the way that they should be, all right. It said useful, beneficial.
Please insert an SD card.
Make fit or ready, prepare, you know. All right. So everything might be lawful, all right, but everything may not be, useful or beneficial to you, you know. Hey, drinking a beer every night isn't useful or beneficial to you, you know. Cause this shit could fuck your health up, you know. All right. Working uh when you have the truth to attend to, all right, that shit could fuck you up, you know. All right. Giving your time to certain things, all right, saying certain things that might offend a brother or offend the ministry, that could fuck you up, all right. So hey, we really in the lot of times where you have to slow shit down and think about your actions, think about your words, all right. Hey, and if anything isn't fit or proper to a use or to a purpose, you should get rid of it, right? Like I remember telling the brother Yawasap, it's about 2 years ago, I trying to be more purposeful with my time, you know. So anything that isn't serving a proper purpose had to go, and that was around the time, because I love basketball, right? Love watching it, love playing it, but that was around the time I had to get rid of them, all right, because it wasn't advantageous to me, all right. It wasn't useful or beneficial, really. It was a vice, all right. It was a vice, all right, because normally you go and spend some time on the court, whatever, you playing the game at the same time you're around two-third a lot, picking up on you don't realize it sometimes, picking up on the language and these kind of things, when you left the court, sometimes you left with it, all right. And then too, after that, you tired as fuck, all right. You go home and you can't do certain things, maybe you can't make it. So yeah, can. So I had to get rid of that. Another thing for me was always being quick to anger, you know. All right. Hey, and I had to get rid of them. All right, because the scripture talks about it. All right, you know, wisdom, Salakia, rod, work it not to wisdom. You know, roughly paraphrasing. All right. So there's certain things might be is going to be different things for different brother, right? But there's certain things that we all need to get rid of, all right? Actually, since we're in Corinthians, still writing Corinthians. This is 1 Corinthians 2 and verse 6. It says, albeit wisdom. Yep. It says 1 Corinthians 2 and verse 6. Albeit we speak wisdom among them that are perfect, yet not the wisdom of this world, nor of the prince of this world. All right. The point is in the first line. It says, albeit we speak wisdom amongst them that are perfect. You know, so that is the perfection that we should be trying to attain. All right. You know, in Matthew 5 and 48, it says, be thou perfect as your Father is perfect. All right. All right. And that is the, you know, trying to attain perfection, because, hey, right here, it says, 1 Corinthians 13 and 10, it says, well, when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. All right. Because in these bodies, all right, we would attain perfection, all right, but we wouldn't attain the level of perfection like Yahweh Shai, you know. But ultimately, when he comes back, you know, he's gonna make us fully perfect, you know. But for the time being, we have to, you know, we have to work on our perfection. All right, we have to work towards it. Okay. This is Matthew chapter 5 and verse 48. It says, be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. All right. And that is it right there. You know, we have to, you know, get rid of, you know, things that are holding us back. All right. Hey, you know, I like to go out, you know, and hang out with brothers. All right. But, you know, even something like that, you do that too much, it could come back and harm you. All right. You know, because, you know, you going out Every time you go out, you're spending a lot of money, you know. And you don't want to spend out money that you have put aside for other things, you know, in the name of, oh, you're going to have a good time with the brethren, right? You know, don't be over righteous, don't be overzealous, you know, and there's a vice too, all right? All right, so hopefully this lesson was edifying to the spirit and power of Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem Akakodash. Again, double honors to the apostle and elders of Great Millstone. Say Shalom.